Hello, and welcome to another video tutorial from Kramer Electronics. Today we're going to discuss creating a configuration using Kramer's K-Config software for an RC control panel. As an example, today we're going to use an RC63DL controller, but this process follows through to any one of the control panels that use K-Config software. If you have questions on how to install or download the software, update USB drivers on your computer, update firmware, or set KNet IDs, there are other video tutorials that you should watch before this video. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is open up our K-Config software. Once we go there, we're going to navigate to the driver manager to find the driver that we're going to use for the display that we're going to control. In this case, I want to control a Sharp display. It's a Sharp PG3010X. And this is where all my commands are. We can scroll down the list here. We've got power on, power off, all of our different sources. These commands, as I compare to the user manual for my display, they look right. So the mute on, the mute off, and all the other functions that I'm going to want to use. The other thing that I'm going to want to use is volume. I'm going to want to use my volume knob on the RC63DL to adjust the volume on my display. So I'm going to go to this. And there's volume and table details. We'll go to the table details just to verify these commands. And in this list, we've got a list of 60 different commands. And all these commands are different levels of volume throughout the volume table. And I set it to be a logarithmic method. So I go from 0 to 60, and I want about 15 steps. So each one of these checkboxes on the left-hand side represents a different click on my volume knob. So that's going to do it for me there for my volume. So I verify everything else here and everything's good. My baud rate settings are all okay. Everything is alright. So my power on, my power off, let's set those real quick too. My default power on is that. My default power off is that, just to make sure that those are nice and steady. Lamp hours and power, we don't really need to worry about queries too much. We're not going to query this thing. We're looking for basic control. So once we're done there, we're going to hit apply and then OK. Now we're going to create our configuration. To do that, you click on Control Room, make sure that's blue, hit the plus sign to add a device, and we're going to have a pretty simple control system here, so we're going to use an RC63DL, hit OK, and now we're going to go to our port manager and assign the different ports on these 63 to control the room. So in this tab up here for port manager, we're going to go to the RS-232 terminal block. We click in the driver box here, and let's select that Sharp display. The PGD3010X, OK. My baud rate settings are proper. Everything else is good. I might use relays for screen up and screen down as well, just to show as an example. My device settings, I can see where my firmware and everything is here if I need to update my firmware. I know that the firmware on my device is correct. So now back over to the front panel. Let's label these buttons. So we're going to right click on each button. We're going to set label. We're going to say on, off, PC1, DVD, because that's going to be our composite video, PC2, and mute. Once our buttons are all labeled, we're going to left click on the buttons in order from 1 through 6, and we're going to select our button behavior. In here are all your different button behaviors that you can have. Activate on release means that when you press the button and let go, it's going to activate your one macro, and that's it. Activate while pressed. An example for this one would be if you're going to use buttons for volume up and volume down, and you want to be able to press and hold your button and have it execute commands constantly while you're holding that button. That's what activate while pressed is. Toggle 1, 2, 3, 4. That's to set the button to be a toggle of either 2, 3, or 4 different toggle states. And then states are ways that you can manually adjust toggles based on activities from other buttons. So in this case for on, we're going to do activate on release. Okay, we did the configuration tree already. Now activate on release for off also, and PC, DVD, PC2, and mute we're going to set to be a toggle, and toggle with 2 states. So we press it once, it's going to mute on. Press it again, it's going to mute off. Now as you see on the right hand side here, we have our default macros, or our default triggers that come in. And then down below, you've got your blue triggers, are the triggers that you created yourself. And each one of these triggers are tied to one of these specific buttons. In addition to these 6 triggers, we're going to have a knob up trigger, click again, and then a knob down trigger. So now we have 8 different triggers that are custom triggers that we're going to use. First thing we're going to do is our button on trigger. So first thing we want it to do, we're going to say terminal block for the 232. Our driver fills in automatically. We're going to say power on. We're going to add that to our list. Next thing we want to happen in this, when we press this on button, is we want this on button to flash fast. And this is where you select your colors. So let's say yellow. We're going to add that to the list. Now because there's a warm-up time for my projector, I need to set a 30-second delay here to make sure that my projector is going to warm up and everything is going to be okay for 30 seconds before anybody can move on to the next steps with the controller. So what we're also going to do is to depict that, to say that there's something going on here, we're going to say this display LCD window here, this LCD label, we're going to say warming up. Now from here we put our delay in. Let's make it a 30-second delay. Went a little too far there. Add that to the list. So now we hit the on button, projector turns on, my on button starts flashing yellow, my first display LCD here is going to say warming up, then there's a 30-second delay. Now for 30 seconds nothing is going to happen except that light is going to flash and my display LCD is going to say warming up. After the 30 seconds is up, let's change that over. Let's say the on button is going to turn on steadily and it's going to be green. I'll add that to the list here. LCD window now, we're going to say room on. Add that to the list. And that's about it for turning our projector on and letting our panel do its thing there. Those are kind of the basics there. Now from here I'm going to add some other functions in as well that now we see that we didn't add a screen down command here. Well, let's add a screen down. So relay 1, we're going to say relay 1 close, add that to the list. But now it's down after the 30-second delay. So let's move that back up to before that. We're going to close the relay, let the screen drop down. 30 seconds goes by, our button turns on, our LCD says room is on, everything's okay there. Once that happens, we're going to open that relay back up. So we're ready to close the other one if we need to raise the screen back up afterward. Another thing that I also recommend here is setting a default input command. So that way you know when you turn your projector on every single time it's going to go to a default source. In my case I want my default source to be PC1. So let's go to computer 1. And then we also want the PC1 button to light up. And we're going to make that light up blue. Okay, add that to the list. Also, we have this other LCD window, so why not make that say PC1? So the source is LCD, computer 1, add that to our list. And that's about all the commands that we're going to need to use. One thing I like to use as a safe method here is this button ignore function. The button ignore function means that if you ignore a button, you have to unignore it for somebody to be able to use that button again. So in our off macro, in our off sequence, we're going to ignore all the other buttons down here and the off button to make sure that the only thing that you can do when the room is off is turn it back on using the on button. So now the reverse of that, because we ignore all these other buttons here during the off sequence, we need to unignore all these to be able to use them when the room is on. So we're going to say button off, unignore, add, PC1, unignore, DVD, unignore, PC2, unignore, mute. unignore. Now we're also going to say button on, ignore, to make sure that when the room is already on, it doesn't go back through the on sequence when it's already on, because that on sequence takes 30 seconds because you have a delay in here. So now, when we hit our on button, it's going to turn our projector on, make the on button flash yellow. The display LCD is going to say warming up. Relay 1 is going to close to drop our screen. We have a 30-second delay from there, so for 30 seconds now, nothing else is going to happen. After 30 seconds is up, our on button turns green. The display LCD says room on. That first relay opens back up, so now we can close relay 2 if we need to bring the screen back up when we're done. Then it also says, okay, go to our default source, which is computer 1. The computer 1 button lights up blue. The LCD says computer 1. And now we have all of our ignore and unignore commands. The unignore make it so you can use all of these other buttons here while the room is on. Now on the on one, we ignore the on button to make sure that nobody can press the on button again if the room is already on. So that there is your on button. Now we're going to go on to the off button. First thing we're going to do, our port command, terminal block for RS-232, our driver is there, we're going to say projector off. Add that to the list. And now, button lighting, we need to get about the same as we were before, but button off is going to flash. We're going to flash it yellow now because there's a cooldown time, so we're going to add that to the list. We want the on button to turn off. We want all of the source buttons now to turn off. Turn all these off here. PC2 is going to turn off. And our mute button is going to turn off here. So, all those other buttons are off. We're going to change our LCD window. So the display LCD is going to say cooling down. Our sources LCD, we don't want it to say anything, so we're going to put a couple spaces in there, add it to the list. Now from here, we're going to also bring the screen back up. So we're going to say relay 2 this time, close, add that to the list. Now we're going to put in a delay. So the cooldown time is actually about 60 seconds here for my projector, so I'm going to put 60 in this box, add to the list. Now, we do all these different functions. We turn these lights all off. The off button flashes yellow. The display LCD says cooling down. The sources LCD goes blank. And we have a 60-second delay. Oh, also forgot to mention that the screen is going to go up as well. So our second relay closes. 60-second delay. Now after our 60-second delay, button light, we're going to say off button. I want it to turn off. I don't want any lights on this when the room is off. Then we're going to open our relay back up. So relay 2, open. Because anytime we close a relay, we have to open it again somewhere else. And then we're going to go on to the button ignore. Okay, button on, we're going to unignore that. So we unignored the on button. We want to ignore all of these other buttons to make sure that when the room is off, somebody can't walk up and press the PC1 button and make it look like the PC1 button or the PC1 source is active. So, off, ignore, PC1, ignore, DVD, ignore, PC2, ignore, mute, ignore. These are all optional. You don't have to do these for the on and off, but it makes it a little bit more intuitive and user-friendly so people know exactly what's going on with the room at all times. So that's your off sequence. Now let's go on to our source buttons here. So first thing we're going to do is say projector, go to computer 1. Then we're going to make our button light. The PC1 button is going to turn on. And we want our sources all to be blue here. Okay, then our LCD label. We're going to say computer 1. Okay, the other button lights we want to do, we want to make sure we say DVD turn off, PC2 turn off. So this way only one input can be lit up at any given time. Anytime we turn one on, we want to turn the others off. And that about does it for our PC1 button. The DVD button now, we're going to say composite video, button light, we want the DVD button to be on, and we want that to be blue just like the PC button, added to the list. PC1, we're going to turn this one off. PC2, we're also going to turn off. Also LCD label, the source is LCD, DVD player. Now the PC2 button, we're going to do the same kind of things, and I'm going to show you a little shortcut here. So we click on PC1, we're going to copy our actions from that trigger, click on PC2, and we're going to paste our actions. We're going to say OK. So PC2. So now we're just going to make simple changes here. So our command now for the projector is going to be computer 2. We'll hit OK to edit that. Now, it's not our PC1 button that lights up, it's our PC2 button. So that's going to be on, hit OK. The label, we're going to change that to say computer 2. Make sure this says sources again. OK. DVD, we want that to be off. PC2, well, let's change that to PC1 now. It's going to be off. OK. So that was nice and easy, so we don't have to create new commands, just to show you that you can copy and paste things from trigger to trigger. Next thing is going to be our mute toggle commands. So when we mute things, we're going to say projector mute on, add to the list. And if you look over here, you've got your action list here and toggle numbers. So you've got toggle 1 and toggle 2. This is for toggle 1 that we're working with. So when you press that button the first time, it's going to turn mute on that projector. What we also wanted to do is, let's make this light do something. Let's slow blink, and let's make it orange. So now this light is going to flash slowly, nice and steadily, to let people know that the mute is on, so it's not confusing or anything. You don't have to make it blink. You can have it steady. You don't have to do any lighting at all if you don't want. You can also change your LCDs to say something if you want as well. I like to get a little fancy here, so let's say LCD label display mute on. And I like to do the display because you know anytime you're going to use mute, the room is going to be on. So, and I'll explain that in the next step. So mute on. So now we have our three commands here. We say turn mute on the projector. Let's flash that button slowly and make it orange. And then that display LCD window is going to say mute on. From here, let's go to the second toggle. Now here, we're going to say projector mute off, add, button light, the mute button, off. And now the LCD label, because we know that the room is going to be on, we're going to change that display LCD back to room on. So now when somebody presses the mute button to turn mute on, this light flashes orange. This says mute on to make it really known that the mute button was pressed. That's why you don't have any audio now. When you unmute the room, this stops flashing, mute turns off on the projector, and this goes back to room on. And that's your mute button. Next is for our volume knob, and because we know that we have a volume table in our port manager, or in our driver manager here, we're going to address that. So our port command, we're going to select RS-232 terminal block. Now we get our table settings here. Our driver is correct. So for the turn up knob, we're going to say table up, the volume table. This is the table that we saw in the driver manager. LEDs, we're going to have the LEDs, these 5 LEDs here, for example. change on the RC63DL, and we're going to add that to the list. That's all we need for the turn up. Turn down, we're going to do the reverse. We reselect this 232 port, we say table down, volume table, and the LEDs are going to be the RC63DL. Add to list. From here, our configuration is done for all these different buttons. What I also like to do is a device startup command, or a device startup macro. And what I do is, so what this means is when you unpower your controller, or if the power goes out in the room that the controller is installed in, when the power comes back on, instead of it going back to its default settings of no lights on, and this window says display, this one says sources, you can have it execute a certain macro. Also, sometimes when a projector gets reinitiated with power, it might kick back on. You don't want that to happen if it's a Saturday night and nobody's in the room. So what we do is on this device startup macro, we're going to take the button off, we're going to copy the actions, click on this device startup, and paste those actions in there. Say yes. So now, when this happens, when the power goes out, power comes back on, instead of it saying display and sources, when the controller powers back on, it's going to go through the button off macro, which is what we want it to do, to make it seamless, so nobody realizes that the power actually went off in this room. That about does it for our controller here. All we're going to do is go to connect to it. We go to device, connect. We're going to select the USB port. I don't have one plugged in here, but we're going to select that port, hit OK. Go to write configuration. It's going to go through the process, give you a notification to say that it's all done and complete, and you're all good. You unplug it. You don't have to power it off for it to work or anything, but take it, put it in the wall, and it'll work for you. If you have any questions, feel free to call us, 888-275-6311, or go to kramerus.com. Thanks for being with us today.